hit $10 billion in spending, I think in 2020. So it's become a very big business. There's certain product categories that are really big. Think of beauty, YouTubers in the beauty sector, packaged goods, food. They've done great work with influencers. What does influencer marketing hold for automotive? Where do you see that going in the next few years?
Okay, I'll take that. It's interesting, you know, you referenced the beauty influencers, and I was thinking about that. You know, every, you know, other YouTube video seems to be someone applying a cosmetic, right? And it's a very personal product that lets an individual become an expert. And I was thinking the automotive business is really different, right? The car is the most complex consumer good. It's hard to become an expert. I think there's only a handful of people who are. And so you have those influencers who we look to in the lower funnel, who are the walk-around experts, who actually know something about the technology and design and are an authoritative voice, you know, not at all put offish, someone you can look at in the safety of your home. And then there are those influencers for a brand like Lincoln, which is a challenger luxury brand. You know, we employ a lot of lifestyle influencers. And so for us, it's a really rich mix of both the automotive and then the lifestyle. But the key, I would say, in common with all of them is authenticity. You know, we heard that word just in the last panel, and I'm probably a broken record on that. But I think the authenticity and trust are really at the core of anybody we partner with as an influencer. And I'm sure we can get into more on that. Anne, you probably have a comment on that too.
Yeah, I think the people that are lucky enough to work with me every day, I'm so sorry, they will tell you that our influencer strategy and program is pretty much what keeps me up at night, because to your point, it's really easy to put a strategy down on paper, but executing it in this space is not easy. And I think it's because in other industries, people do gravitate towards those experts. And in auto, that's not what our consumers, most of them, like the everyday average Joe, want. They don't want people talking about the nuts and bolts and the intricacies of how the car is made. We know who those people out there that have the big followings, and we know who their audience is. It's how do I find someone with that authenticity and relatability that is not just going to be a one-time kind of flash in the pan. I think it's really easy to find people for individual campaigns and needs, and you can interject them when you need to for that specific marketing need, but I don't know that any of us really know what that's doing for us in the long run. And what you guys have done with your celebrity kind of face is such a huge risk for a brand to take, and obviously you've gotten lucky in that he's not done anything crazy. I know, he's amazing, a great pick. But I think we're all trying to figure it out because auto is hard. And I don't know that anyone's nailing it yet.
I agree, and just a comment, you said something about, for the long term. I think that's something we look at too. We find that the best rate of success is with someone we stick with. And in terms of vetting that person to make sure that the relationship is authentic, that takes an investment. We've found that the more we give to influencers, the more we get back. So, for instance, when we revealed the Aviator recently in Los Angeles, we brought a number of the influencers together and staged a salon-style dinner where they could meet each other, exchange different points of view, and it formed some lasting relationships and really good feelings towards Lincoln. So those are the kind of people we want to partner with.
So when you think about your influencers that you're working with, and as you're surfing around looking at influencers who are doing things in other sectors and brands that are working with influencers, what are some of the things that you see that are success practices or mistakes that brands might be making that oh, we don't want to do that?
Yeah, I think the whole influencer game, if you will, there's so much gamesmanship in the stats and the numbers and the data, and it's hard to know what you're really going to get. So I think there's a huge degree of just kind of test and learning. And the cool thing about working with influencers on individual campaigns or events or executions is you kind of get to test drive them, right? So you invite someone out and you see what they're really about in real life, and then how their audience actually reacts to them. And if it works, then maybe you go back to them a second time or a third time or ask them to have a long-term relationship with you. But the analysis of who's going to be the right fit is really, it's just kind of a gut feel, and 10 different people can have 10 different gut feels about the same person. So it's just a lot of having an organization that supports that kind of risk tolerance to test and learn, and that you're going to associate yourself with someone, but have a safety net at the same time, that you're not going all in until there's kind of a known entity in that relationship with you.
And that protects you when Instagram cleans out all the bots.
Yeah.
Which happened, I don't know if you guys were paying attention to that. It happened a few months ago, and people's followings, a lot of people lost a lot of their data, their numbers, their followings, because all of a sudden all those fake accounts were cleaned out. And I think we're going to continue to see more of that. So, John?
Yeah, I do. I think it's still such a new sort of viable, marketing tactic, right? That it's unfolding before our eyes. I mean, when we see it come across as disingenuous, if someone just shows up and takes a photo and then they're off, you feel a little scorned, a little burned, which I go back to, which is why after vetting people, we invest in them. We've got, Lincoln's got partnerships in hotels. We'll give them the Lincoln experience. We'll leave handwritten notes in their room. We get to know what food they like. And so start to really build that relationship, and it becomes an authentic relationship. So that's one thing. I think I've also found that you can't just chase numbers. I mean, that's the other thing. I think we're already graduating past that, where, you're recommending someone who has X million followers. That's not what it's about. It's about the engagement. And the engagement is going back to that authenticity. If it doesn't feel right and if it doesn't feel true, it doesn't matter that there are 3 million followers, because they could just as well be bots. I mean, we're also living through some scandal. I mean, look at the Fire Festival, right? I mean, and I've been involved in some lively debates there where people will throw down saying that was the most amazing social media campaign ever, and yet, they couldn't follow through. It was a dismal failure. Or the Theranos scandal. See, scandal gets people's attention, right? It's good. But we're living in that age, and so I think everyone's antennae are up at sniffing out something that feels false.
So let's talk about something that got everybody's attention in a good way. And I don't know how much you can talk about this, but a little bit at least. We talked about this earlier, Disney. And after the Rogue was introduced as part of the Star Wars film premiere, the sales skyrocketed. Rogue did really well. And a lot of that had to do, of course, with the movie and all of that alliance. But Disney creates great best practices for social influence, because half their budget is in influence. So tell us a little bit about what you saw maybe learned from Disney and saw through that program.
So that the Rogue One partnership, when Rogue One launched as a movie, and we happened to be launching the new road, I mean, talk about kismet. It made so much sense. And aligning with a brand like Disney, the brand association factor just can't be replicated. So that was really a no-brainer. And we got really positive sentiment around it. There was a lot of activation elements. We met a lot of great people, both on their side and on our side, that have continued relationships. And I think that's where, when we talk about kind of our brand influencer strategy, like using other companies and other brands and other partnerships as that influencer layer has a lot of value, maybe more so than individuals that have 50 bazillion followers. Because brands that have gotten to that level, there's some tried and true longevity there. They know what they're doing. And I think, we learned that those things, I don't know, what looks really, really good on paper usually makes total sense in the marketplace, right? And the culture responded to it, and the fans responded to it. The overlap between our fans and the audience base was a no-brainer. I think we learned that the amount of brand identity we were able to maintain through that was difficult, because we got a little bit lost in the mix and in the conversation. It ended up working for us, but going forward, what we heard through the Black Panther is, unless your car and your brand is somewhat of a star and has a reason for being there. The amount of effort and kind of give and take that's involved in that sort of relationship just has to be really carefully analyzed. I think we would absolutely go back and do it all over again if given the choice, because it was a fantastic experience and we got a lot out of it. But I think if it comes down to the opportunity cost of a partnership like that versus some of the other things, there just has to be a really hybrid model between the two.
You have to make sure that the car is integrated into the message and all the message points. I think that's something that a lot of people miss, especially with influencer marketing, is a lot of influencers think it's all about me, it's all about my audience, it's all about blah, 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 and I'm happy to take a photo, and then they lose engagement. They lose engagement with you. So let's talk a little bit about the different types of influencers and how you choose. So you talked about authenticity and building a relationship with them, but there are different levels of influencers, from Matthew McConaughey to all the people who lined up to take photos of the Rogue One Star Wars edition at auto shows and shared them on Instagram and Facebook with their friends and family. So that's the whole spectrum of influence. So tell us a little bit about where you feel the best influence is within that spectrum. What works best for you?
Well, sure. I'll take a stab. I mean, for us, it's a real blend, right? Because we've got, Matthew McConaughey, A-list renowned actor, sort of representing a certain thing for Lincoln. And I'll say, that partnership, which is about 4 years old now, has worked for Lincoln very much. As a challenger brand, I think we knew we were looking for a celebrity to come in and not do the typical recitation of features or just say, I love Lincoln. He never says that. But he provides a certain swagger, and I think it was, it was a challenging sell at the time, because it wasn't really conventional for a car launch under Ford. And the spots have their own sort of restrained energy to them. They almost feel more like film trailers. So I think, it's evolved over time, but I think, first of all, American actor in his own comeback arc, as Lincoln was, made a movie called The Lincoln Lawyer. There were a number of points that were very strong, pointing towards Matthew and his willingness. He really wanted to partner with an American brand, hadn't really done that kind of thing at the time, had just won the Academy Award and come off of True Detective. So his brand was white hot. Lincoln needed help. And I think the way we've used him to kind of provide sort of a tone and swagger, cool guy, cool car, has done wonders for them. So it's not, a rational feature sell. It's more about, would I be proud to have this in my driveway? So he's on one end of the spectrum, and yet then we have other influencers. We just had some in the agency yesterday who were sitting down with a product information specialist from Lincoln, learning about the car, and they're here on the floor today, and that's very different. We've also found that, I think, with the micro-influencers we tend to use, one piece of learning is that it didn't really make sense to put paid behind them. That soon felt disingenuous when they went beyond their sort of organic sphere of influence. So we keep them as organic feed influencers, and we tend to put the paid behind someone like Matthew, or recently Serena Williams, who, I think I was speaking to a dealer earlier today, just saying it's really interesting as we monitor Serena, she provides that authenticity, and it's really remarkable that she can do it for a number of brands, right? So we look to monitor that. I worry about, is she partnering with too many brands? But she owns a Lincoln. She had a Navigator when she was younger. She has several now. And, her story as a powerful, successful mom and comeback queen really resonates with consumers. So we've actually found that we can use her in social and as an influencer and in broadcast as a paid celebrity. So there's a spot running right now with her.
And she adds to your diversity appeal.
And she adds
to the diversity appeal.
Absolutely.
Which I think is one of the great things about influencers, is that you can work with a pool of people, and each one of them has different appeal to different audiences. So you can work with a very diverse group. So tell us a little bit about your thinking when it comes to the types of influencers that you work with.
Yeah, I'm unpopular in my opinion in this because I think working with kind of mega influencers, I think we can buy those eyeballs in other ways through media. And unless, again, it's a long-term relationship that makes sense, that's where I think that's where that plugs in, right? It's not one and done, and no one knows what spot that was or what brand that was because it was just a one-time flash in the pan. If I could have like 5 more people that were just every day managing a micro-influencer SWAT team, that's really where I'd be pouring my energy because I think that's what's moving the needle for us. We did a really cool program last year with our Titan truck owners. It was all, I mean, even calling them micro-influencers is a stretch. Some of them are like, I have no idea why I'm here, but this is amazing because we took them out to
Maybe they're
events.
nano-influencers?
Yeah, nano, there you go. That's perfect. But they are Titan owners and they're passionate about it and they have these social circles that we frankly can't break into authentically, right? But they're all talking to each other and they all know each other and their word is gold. And they're the ones showing up on forums when people are shopping for trucks and turning those type of people into brand advocates and starting relationships with them and giving them things and special access and experiences, I think is what we all should be doing full time. It's just a really heavy lift to do that in the right way so you don't mess up and then turn who were your passionate owners into, trolls.
Haters.
Haters.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I just think taking the money that we're spending on some of these flash in the pan type relationships, if we poured that into doing right by our customers and our owners and turning who might be nano influencers into micro influencers or bigger in their own right, like helping them get more exposure and associations and networks, I think helps everybody.
But then you're creating advocates and evangelists, and it's work, like you said, it's hard. But when you do that, you create lasting relationships and partnerships. We've had examples of, people we've invited to some events and certainly nurtured the relationship, and they've come back later to offer free, postings. So there's that aspect too, turning your paid influencer into a fan, right, where they want to give and talk about the new Corsair, right, after you've used them with Aviator. That's wonderful, right, and that's real.
Well, because it goes back to the influencer being engaged with you and your message and in the space of automotive and wanting to continue to talk about it, liking the subject and liking the message that you want to get across. So if you want to talk about interiors, influencers who can talk about that and who want to talk about the next car is so valuable. So tell us a little bit about how you measure the effectiveness. I mean, of course, at the end of the spectrum, it's people buy a car because they learned about it, they went to a dealer, they had a great experience, and they bought the car. But what are the other measures that you put against influencer campaigns?
So a lot of it's about reach and engagement. Did we see a positive impact on our brand wherever their activity was running? That to me is the battle, though. I don't know how you accurately measure it to any degree of certainty and isolate that as the factor, right? Because when you're using influencers, there's about 10 different components at play. And yes, the influencers can get you a new audience that maybe you hadn't been tapped into, and it's in a different manner than you could do it yourself. But I struggle with being able to say, well, that got us more than if we would just had gone out and bought that reach ourselves. And again, if that person doesn't have a purpose for being in that conversation and they're not authentic and it's not meaningful and then we don't see them again, I actually think those measurements that we saw at that point of time, I feel like it can almost damage us in the long run because if they turn around even a year later and do something different, their audience for some of these people is so avid, they're going to notice. It's just the measurement piece to me is making us all kind of feel good about we got the reach, we got the numbers, we got the engagement. But I think unless you can prove a long-term brand association kind of halo, that's, again, going back to you need long-term relationships for this to really make sense.
Yeah, I agree. It's tough to measure. A lot of it is qualitative. You know, we have community managers kind of just measuring, response and sentiment, and then you have your sentiment data, right, and favorable opinion, and ultimately sales. But it's hard to pinpoint exactly what had the actual influence. I think one thing we look at is just post-event. What the post will be from the influencer, and sort of keeping in touch their general feeling about the brand. And so, as I said, a lot of it is qualitative. It's hard to put the numbers together in a really compelling case.
So do you employ a strategy such as finding an influencer who's got a great approach to particular style, creative style, to their content, and then putting a media budget behind it, sharing it on Facebook, sharing it on Instagram, things? Is that part of what you would do with an influencer?
I mean, yeah, I think every media campaign that we do, there's an element usually of there's an influencer component, right? And I think we all as marketers have become so data driven, and it's so scientific, and we want to have the numbers behind it. This influencer piece, while there's numbers attached to it, that's still kind of okay, we're going to test this out. We don't really know what it's going to do for us, but maybe it's going to work. And you have to be comfortable with not being able to have the data to back it up, maybe in the end, and pinpoint it. But I don't know that anybody's going to go out and just do 100% influencers on some big launch and not have any other, components behind that campaign. You just got to figure out to what degree, to what piece of the bucket that fills in your campaign spend that makes sense. So you're not going all out with one thing, and you're really balanced and hitting what you need to hit.
Yeah, I mean, and ultimately, your hands are off the reins at that point, right? Because, and I think that's part of the vetting. Again, certainly as a luxury brand, representing a luxury brand, we're looking at the quality of their images. We're not changing those images, but they should feel like they're appropriate for a luxury brand. Lincoln's looking both at taking the brand in a more youthful way and widening the reach. And so, but there's certainly some guidelines to that, right? We're not just going for the biggest number if the feed isn't reflective of sort of the theme and quality and approach of the brand.
So I think it's interesting with influencers. We are getting away from 5 years ago. We were looking at what they would reach. Who has 1 million followers, who has 100,000 followers, that kind of thing. And I think it's nice that we're really looking at what they do and who they reach. So I have one more question, and then I think we're going to turn it over to the audience. Where in the overall campaign strategy does influencers come in? And is it sometimes something that you add on? Well, oh, we need a little more engagement. Let's throw in some influencer marketing, or is it something that's part of the campaign at the beginning?
I honestly think what you just said before is why this has changed so much in the past few years. 5 years ago, I couldn't very reliably buy the audience I wanted. I couldn't say, I know all of these people are about to buy the brand new 2020 Versa that's up on the floor today. I don't know if it's out yet, actually. I haven't been over there yet. I should check that. Okay, good. It looks amazing. But now I literally know who those people are that I want to reach, and I can buy them. Like, the platforms have become so sophisticated that I can reach their eyeballs. Influencers used to be our gateway to that. We would say, I'm pretty sure I know who follows these set of people. They can get the message out. Now it's more about the brand association, to your point. Like, does their content resonate and give a new aspect to what we're putting out? And since it's from them, it's a little bit more trusted, or it's just a cooler vibe, or it's not a corporation putting it out. And that's where the shift in buying the reach, if you will, has changed. It's more about building brand association than buying the eyeballs.
And just to comment, it's not an afterthought for us. It's completely baked in. And that maybe other agencies do it differently. Hudson Rouge is one big floor, about 60 people, fully integrated. So we're sitting next to the people, social, brand content, media, strategy, creative. So we're all, and public relations. So we're looking at it, I'd say, more holistically, right? And so social is just part of every launch plan that we go into.
Do we have questions from the audience? One back there. And buying your eyeballs, by the way, is, think about it as the newsstand. It's not an ad, it's delivering content to people who are already interested. That's what the platforms do that's so brilliant. And I think there's a differentiation. I think a lot of brands look at influencers as, well, you know, we already do advertising, and influencers and advertising are different, and the way that we promote them on the social platforms is different. We have a question?
Hi, my name is Fran Richards from Hookit Sponsorship Analytics, but I have a quick question for each one of you guys. Which single social platform are you finding the most engagement on, whether that be Facebook or Instagram stories? Could you give us some insight from each of you?
So that depends who you're talking about, because there's very different audiences that we're trying to reach. So if I'm trying to get news of the new Versa out, Twitter is my friend. So I want all the media to be covering that and the journalists to be talking about it, and that's where they are. When we're launching the Versa, like we just did this past weekend, we revealed it at a music festival, I am all about Instagram stories. And our influencers were posting on stories the entire time we were at that event. So there's definitely a role for each of them. It just depends on what our objective is for that content.
Yeah, just to echo that, I mean, if it's definitely in the here and now and timely, Instagram stories has been really, really successful for us. You know, I think, again, as a luxury brand, Instagram has also been really, really nice at just sort of being a simple visual medium. So Lincoln tends to work nicely there.
Do we have another question?
Part of the unwitting success of social media campaigns, the Matthew McConaughey campaign in particular, is that it becomes easily parodied. And I'm curious what kind of, as you start moving into the second and third wave of creative and become aware that the ads have become very familiar, and even to the point where they've become almost parodied or often parodied elsewhere, how does that then fold into your next wave of creative?
That's a great question. I mean, and you're right, that the initial wave of parody wasn't anticipated. It was welcomed. Millions of dollars of earned media were very much liked and appreciated. But I'll give you one example. We know that the people who watch those McConaughey spots watch them differently than other spots. Fans have been known to freeze frame and analyze and develop backstories. They'll put their own voiceovers on it on YouTube, so a lot of user-generated content. When we made the Navigator spot, I don't know if you remember that, with Matthew crossing a body of water on a car ferry, we put what we were calling an Easter egg into that. There was a journal that he's writing in, and we actually made the journal. It's a prop. And on each page is an illustration, a story from the past spots, each one. So he was on a fictitious journey for Lincoln, and we published that in social, and we animated the pages, and we were basically giving the fans who are rabid, who want to dive deeper, another way to continue on a different screen that whole narrative from the TV spot. So that's one way, one different approach we're using.
We have to wrap. Scotty and panel, thank you so much.
Thank you.